Canada's west coast features quite a unique rainforest, one whose biodiversity has always fascinated ecologists, the Pacific temperate rainforest. The humid Pacific winds unleash a phenomenal amount of rain on the west coast, up to 5 meters per year. Indeed, it's the wettest region in North America. Water gushes everywhere, creating roaring waterfalls and powerful rivers before flowing into the Pacific Ocean. Water provides life along the way, and in certain places, the forest is sometimes akin to paradise.
You're doing great, man.
You think?
Damien and Francois Xavier are seasoned explorers. The combination of their expertise makes for a fearsome team, which offers a new perspective on Canada's natural history. Their goal is to explore the most remote and inaccessible recesses of British Columbia in order to better understand the natural laws that govern them. Today, the two men are flying due north in their ultralight airplane. It's the first day of their great adventure, during which they'll explore Canada's unique West Coast ecosystem, the Pacific temperate rainforest. The rainforest stretches for over 2,000 kilometers along the North American West Coast, from the steppes of California to the boreal forest, and east to west from the coastal mountain range to the Pacific Ocean.
What a gorgeous river. Did you see the color of that water?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So, if I'm not mistaken, this river should lead us directly to the sea.
We're almost there.
The secret behind this ecosystem is its special bond with the ocean. In many places along this stretch, land and sea are so intertwined that it's hard to tell them apart. Indeed, the fates of these two seemingly very different environments are closely bound by a 1,000-year-old cycle of organic matter, a constant flux of nutrients between the ocean and the forest.
Did you see the size of those trees?
What a great spot.
Our adventurers will start their expedition with the seabed. Then they'll travel upriver to observe the mass migrations of salmon, a key species for the survival of this ecosystem. Along the way, they'll discover the fascinating world of the coastal grizzly bear. And finally, our two explorers will get to climb a 1,000-year-old tree in the heart of the forest.
Oh, that's the ocean coming up.
Okay, I see him.
Francois Xavier is meeting up with Tavish Campbell, an expert on the region's marine ecosystem. Together, they'll explore the waters of the Johnston Strait, smack dab in the middle of the rainforest, a spot Captain Cousteau once described as being one of the most diverse he'd ever explored.
And there's the beach. That should be doable, right? I think it's big enough?
Yeah, it should work.
Meanwhile, Damien will continue on northwards, his destination a magical place that the locals call the Great Bear Rainforest.
Easy now.
Too much speed, I need to slow down.
Take your time. You got this. Yes! Nice! Nice!
Oh, yeah!
Whoa, perfect landing.
And a beach landing. Woo!
Fantastic. What a smooth landing.
Have fun, man.
Hi there, how's it going?
Good, you made it.
Yeah, I did. Whoa. Perfect.
Good?
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. How was your flight?
It was pretty good, yeah. Beautiful, really beautiful. Yeah. How are the conditions for diving?
Good. Yeah, they're looking really nice. Yeah, it's great having it calm and
The light is amazing.
oh, this light coming down is going to be awesome. And it's looking pretty clear too. So
Yeah, I noticed. So where are we going exactly?
well, we're just going to go down. It's actually not too far from here, just down around the corner.
Yeah.
It's a nice point that sticks out into the channel. You can see we have quite a bit of current here still, but it's slackening off, and it's going to be slack tide and pretty shortly here.
So how come you know so much about this environment?
I've always been interested in it, and me and my sister started diving from a pretty young age, and it's just, you know, it's been our front yard. It's been our front yard and our backyard for our whole lives.
Yeah, it seems like you spend a lot of energy trying to protect this as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that comes naturally to anyone who spends a lot of time in a certain area.
Yeah.
You know, is once you grow to know it and grow to love it, then you want to protect it. And for so long, you know, we dove around here, but it was only us that were able to see the life down there and the colors, and we'd come up just ecstatic about these dives, just, you know, bubbling over with all this enthusiasm and excitement. So now to be able to go down and, you know, have cameras down with us and bring some of this imagery back up to the surface is pretty exciting for us.
The two men jump into the water equipped with oxygen masks and a radio system that will allow them to communicate during the dive.
So we're starting our adventure in the depth of the Johnstone Strait.
Que nous commençons cette aventure, ça peut paraître étonnant à première vue de commencer.
It may seem odd to begin exploring a forest by way of the seabed, but we'll soon see that part of the source of the abundance of the forest lies under the surface of the ocean.
L'abondance des forêts terrestres. Ces deux écosystèmes.
These two ecosystems, the marine and the rainforest ecosystems, form an indivisible whole.
Indissociables.
And between these two ecosystems, there's what's known as a keystone species. A keystone species is so crucial to its specific environment that the latter couldn't survive without the former. In this specific case, salmon is the keystone species. We'll see that Pacific salmon spend one part of their lives in the ocean and the other one in the terrestrial river system. And it's precisely this journey from ocean to forest that we'll try to follow. And Pacific salmon will act as our guides for the duration of this program.
So you can see as we move along the cliff here, we're starting to see some plumose anemones. These large white things looking like cauliflower. And they're a filter feeder, just like these tube worms. See these big fields of tube worms?
There's just so much life clinging on to these rocks.
These currents that we're feeling here are the exact reason there's so much life along this cliff. All these colorful species we're seeing along here, the majority of them are filter feeders. So when you're a filter feeder and you rely on the feed to come to you, it makes a lot of sense to be situated where the current is flowing past you, bringing lots and lots of food every day.
Tavish and Francois Xavier are swimming in a soup of plankton. It's the main source of life on this reef. Plankton is composed of tiny plant or animal organisms that drift along the currents of the planet's vast oceans. Plankton is crucial to the ocean's food chain. However, as it needs sunlight to survive, it can grow only in the first 40 meters below the surface of the water. This is known as the photic zone. The vast majority of marine species live in this zone. However, plankton eventually dies off and sinks to the bottom, thus continuously depriving marine life of sustenance-providing nutrients. What allows this ecosystem to maintain its balance are what are known as upwelling waters. Upwelling waters are strong marine currents that well up from the depths, carrying along with them the nutrients that have collected on the seabed and propelling them towards the surface. It's this constant mixing of the ocean waters that allows this part of the world to be so full of life. Tavish and Francois have reached the end of the photic zone. But instead of plunging deeper in the depths, they prefer to head towards another kind of aquatic paradise.
Cet endroit, tout à fait
This place
extraordinaire.
is really incredible.
J'ai l'impression que nous pénétrons dans une
It's like entering a sort of seaweed forest.
fête d'algues.
So this is a beautiful example of a bull kelp forest. Look at this towering three-dimensional structure that it gives the ocean. The kelp forests play an incredibly important role, providing habitat for a number of different species in the ocean. All the way up from the largest fish down to the smallest little invertebrates, including young rockfish and salmon. So this bull kelp is actually an annual species, and it's some of the fastest growing seaweed in the world, sometimes growing up to 2 feet per day. So over the course of the season, this kelp will grow up to sometimes 20 meters in length, providing incredible structure in the ocean. So you can see here we've come across a little bit of an urchin barren. But you can see after the sea urchins have moved through, all you're left with on the bottom is some encrusting coral and algae, and all the seaweed has been eaten off the bottom. So if we turn this sea urchin over, we can actually see its mouth part here. So right in there you can actually see it's eating 2 pieces of kelp right there. It's eating 2 frogs of bull kelp. Right underneath. So we've caught him red-handed. So historically, when we had sea otters on the coast, the sea otters would prey upon the urchins and keep the urchin populations in control. And when the sea otter was hunted to extinction on this coast for its furs, then the sea urchins didn't have their natural predators. So the sea urchin populations exploded, and subsequently they ate down all the kelp. And the kelp forests like this are very rare to find nowadays, because the sea urchin populations are so large.
In 1968, the government of British Columbia reintroduced sea otters on part of the coast, and the results were almost immediate. In the most repopulated areas, the kelp forests and all of their inhabitants have made a huge comeback. Everything is interconnected here, like links in a chain. Break one link, and the whole chain comes apart. Summer on the west coast is coming to an end, and under the leaves of the trees of the rainforest, an amazing story is unfolding, that of a crucial 1,000-year-old exchange between the ocean and the forest. It's a story of life and death, of a great destiny, and of an epic journey. It's the story of salmon. In the icy waters of a mountain river, Pacific salmon have reached the end of their journey. Their ancestors started coming here over 6 million years ago. They've been coming to this coast since the start of the last ice age, and certainly well before the first humans ever set foot here. Each summer, hundreds of millions of salmon undertake one of the world's most amazing migrations. From the depths of the Pacific Ocean, they swim thousands of kilometers upriver, as far as the deep forest, in order to reproduce at the exact spot where they were born. Their journey literally defines the fate of the West Coast. They are the most important link between the ocean and the forest. Upon contact with the fresh water, the salmon stop feeding and begin an impressive mutation. At the end of their journey, they start to decompose and embark on the last but most important days of their lives. In the darkness of the undergrowth, they're all searching for the ideal spot to deposit their offspring. A gravel bed, neither too small nor too big. A slight current for the oxygen, but not too strong. The female then digs a nest with her tail and delicately deposits her eggs. The male then adds his sperm. After that, the couple need only to protect their treasure while awaiting their own demise. A 100 years of human development have nonetheless greatly altered this epic journey. To maintain plummeting salmon stocks, mankind has come up with a simple and efficient solution. Today in British Columbia, over 10% of the salmon that swim upriver will arrive at vastly different spawning grounds. In the hatchery that substitutes for their gravel beds, salmon are collected and then sorted according to species. The females are stripped of their eggs and the males of their sperm. Then eggs and sperm are mixed together and placed in an incubator. A few months later, a much greater number of young salmon than nature is able to produce is released into the river. Because this allows mankind to maintain not only salmon stocks, but also industrial fishing, hatcheries have become a necessary evil. However, on the coast, certain people have a different take on things.
Like when they're all lined up like that, you can just count them one at a time. All right, Rob, I'm gonna work back to you now so we can kind of count these together. I'm Will Atlas. I work for Cucks Project Society as Salmon Program Coordinator based in Bella Bella. Well, Cucks is a community organization in Bella Bella that has almost a 10-year track record of running science programs that support Healthsick-led stewardship of resources that are important to the Healthsick First Nation.
The Healthsick we're a band of First Nations people have inhabited this place for over 13,000 years and have depended pretty heavily on all of our resources for sustenance and survival. Probably about 4,000 band members, one of the bigger reserves and tribes on the central coast of British Columbia. We're salmon-driven people. Everything that we depend on is also dependent on salmon.
NS stands for natural senescent, basically fish that died naturally after spawning. BK is bear kill, wolf kill. We talk a lot about the sort of salmon crisis or the challenges facing salmon in some ways. And I think that to a certain degree that's true, particularly in places where urbanization, agriculture, forestry, other land use change has essentially fundamentally altered their habitats.
10 NS chums and 3 NS pinks. 2 bear-kill chum and a bear-kill pink.
But still, I mean, in the Central Coast region, we have very intact, healthy habitats. And if you think about intact habitat as the principal in your bank account, we have a very full bank account here. So salmon are well equipped to weather the potential, impacts of the coming century if we can protect habitat or continue to protect habitat here, and also make sure that we're not over-harvesting these populations moving forward.
6 NS pinks.
We get an estimate of the total population using mark-recite techniques where we walk the spawning creeks in the fall and recite both tagged and untagged fish. And from the ratio of tagged and untagged fish, we're able to expand that to an estimate of the total population size. It can be, challenging. It's a long season. We start in mid-April with the smolt trap, and we go till the end of July. But overall, I mean, it's a very rewarding work, and the guys that we get to work with are, really great. And so there's a lot of camaraderie and a lot of jokes, and it's a pretty excellent lifestyle, actually. I mean, it's such a small distance, but I'm curious to see whether there's any sort of asynchrony in, some years you have more fish spawning down here than up there, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. We run fish weir, where we capture a large number of the sockeye that are migrating upstream to spawn. So a fish weir is basically a picket fence in a river, and it's designed to sort of channel fish into a certain area. We live on the river, and we monitor the weir, we maintain the weir every day, throughout the day, and we tag the fish with individually visible tags. That allows us to look at migration rates through the lower river, because we actually conduct snorkel counts twice a week from the lake down to the weir. I mean, there's evidence of weirs going back 5,000 or 6,000 years on the BC and Alaska coast, so that's an ancient technology.
There was lots of stories about, the creeks being so full of salmon that you could run across and not get your feet wet. What we're doing is fighting back, looking at a more in-depth approach to salmon populations through projects like the Quay Weir, so that we can, say, X amount of sockeye are in the river, so, you can go ahead and fish. Or it's a dry season, no more fishing until the sockeye can get in the river.
Just pulling out the otoliths, which is the ear bone. And the otolith, like a ring of a tree, records growth rings for every year of the fish's life, but you can tell the years by a tightening of the rings, which is indicative of slower growth during winter. So these otoliths will basically tell us how long each of these fish spent at sea before returning. And so when they were spawned in the gravel here at Quay. Salmon have always been, a resource that is fundamentally, when best managed at a local scale. And so I think the people that live, in and around the watersheds where salmon return ought to be the ones that principally harvest them and manage them. They also have, you might say, more skin in the game. They have more at stake.
Well, the future is now. If we don't stand up for these sockeye populations, for these grizzly bears, for these trees, for all these resources in the land and sea that don't have a voice, then none of our children to come are going to have the opportunity to live the life that we're living right now.
Spring has arrived on Kauai River, and life comes into its own again. From the icy waters that have seen their parents' demise, young salmon emerge. These in turn will soon let themselves be carried off by the current towards the Pacific waters, so that they too can fulfill their great destiny. Damien is now in the Great Bear Rainforest, along with bear expert Tim Irvin, where they'll try to observe grizzly bears. Because they eat so much salmon, grizzly bears are actually key players when it comes to the flow of nutrients from sea to forest. This beaver hydroplane will transport the camera crew and all their equipment to a floating lodge in the heart of the Smith Estuary, in the middle of grizzly bear country.
Yeah, they're pretty amazing boats, eh?
Yeah.
What I love about being here is all like the, you know, all this mist and everything in the trees, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's just so, it's so beautiful and has a real ethereal feel to it.
Why is it such a special place for the bears there?
Well, I think that the first part is that this is the biggest piece of temperate rainforest left in the world. Here in the Great Bear Rainforest, it's the largest intact piece. And so just on that note alone, because there's a big intact wilderness here, it means there's a lot of good habitat for bears. It's not interrupted by human activities in the way that it is in many other parts of the world. And the other thing about this environment that makes it really great for bears and supports a lot of bears is that it's a really productive environment. We have the ocean and the forest, and they mingle together, so it becomes a very rich environment with a lot of nutrient sharing between the ocean and the forest. And there's a lot of food, so it can support a lot more bears than some more sparse environments. But then in the fall, when you get that concentrated food source in the form of salmon in the river valley, you know, we could have as many as between 40 and 60 bears using this river valley.
That's impressive.
So we'll get out here and we'll head upstream so we can get a better chance to see salmon spawning in the shallow water where bears can get access to it.
Okay.
We're getting up towards where the fish are spawning,
Okay.
where the bears are actively hunting the salmon. So we have to be really careful because we could bump into a bear literally at any moment here. Hey, bear!
It is pretty dense here, yeah?
It's really dense. The sight lines aren't very good, so you hear me yelling, "Hey, bear," every now and then.
Okay.
That's so we don't startle a bear. The worst thing you want to do is startle a bear because you force it to make a fast decision, and if it chooses to defend itself, it's very dangerous for us. You smell that?
Mm-hmm. It smells a bit rotten, eh?
I smell something stinky. Oh yeah. Yeah, we've got something up here. Hey, bear.
Oh yeah, it smells pretty strong.
Wow, yeah. Check this out.
Some leftovers?
Yeah, we're hot on the trail now. What do you think we've got here?
That's some salmon there.
Yeah, so this looks like this is what's left of a chum salmon. You can actually see the jaws here. You can see these big teeth.
Yeah.
Chum salmon get these really enlarged teeth during spawning that they use to attract females and fight off other males. Definitely not much left of this guy. Mm-hmm. But you can see those giant teeth that are very typical of a spawning chum salmon, especially a male. They get really enlarged. In some ways, it's kind of like, you think of like the really large antlers on a moose,
really
which seems to be part of the
yeah.
sexual selection of these species. Yeah, they're really impressive.
Oh. What happens to what's left of all this?
If we came back in a few days, this would be covered in maggots, and you come back a few days later and just be stripped clean, just be a perfect skeleton. But what happens is the bear's going to wander off, and the bear's going to urinate and defecate in the forest, and it's going to take all the nutrients from this fish and spread it around the forest as it does that. In the meantime, the nutrients from this carcass are going to melt into the forest and be absorbed by the roots. So these salmon are born here in these rivers in the forest. They go out to the ocean, and they absorb all these nutrients from the ocean. They come back up here and they die, and the bears and the wolves and these nutrients get absorbed. So what's really amazing is when you look at the cross sections of these trees, what you'll find is that the really big salmon runs correspond exactly with the large growth rings in the trees. What happens is the trees sort of nurture the river, keep the water temperature low by shading it, reducing erosion, provides this great nursery for the fish, and in turn the fish come back and fertilize the trees. It's an amazing cycle that keeps this forest going. Yeah, it really is. It really is. Come here, Damon, come here.
Oh, wow.
There's mother and 2 cubs over there.
Right there,
You see them through the woods?
Yeah.
Wow, she's a beautiful bear.
So big.
Yeah, she's a healthy bear.
Oh, and you can see the salmons jumping around.
Yeah, so you can see what I mean? See how the shallow water over there?
Yeah.
You can actually see the tails of the salmon out of the water. Wow. Yeah, those cubs are pretty healthy looking here. Take a look. This is a great place for those bears and good place for us.
Definitely.
Nice.
Nice found, really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you can see that big muscle on her shoulder there.
Uh-huh.
That's a really nice way to tell a black bear from a grizzly bear, because grizzlies have that big hump on their shoulders, big digging muscles. Oh, there she goes, there she goes.
Oh, it's chasing
Did you
again.
get it? No. Sometimes people make it sound like it's easy for them, and it's not. You know, they miss more than they succeed. We've already seen her miss a couple times here already, you know?
Yeah.
And you notice the cubs, they're learning here. Like you can see them taking a few runs at the fish, but at this age, their success rate at catching their own fish is probably pretty poor. Most of the time, she'll catch a fish, she'll start eating it, and the cubs will walk over and start chewing on it, and eventually she'll walk away and let them have it. Oh, look, he's got one there. You see the tail?
Oh, I'm bringing it back.
Yeah.
Pretty good lifestyle.
So this is kind of exactly what we talked about. You saw that bear go into the woods there. It's taking that fish into the woods, it's going to consume it in the woods, it's going to leave the carcass in there. So what you find is bears are an amazing nutrient transport system because they take a lot of fish and they actually move them into the river.
The bears barely notice the presence of Damien and Tim. They're far too busy fishing for dinner. After all, there's not that much time left to fatten up before salmon stocks dry up and winter sets in. By next month, these bears will eat up to 40 kilograms of fish and gain almost 1 kilogram a day. In general, these young grizzlies use techniques they've picked up from their mothers with varying degrees of success. But practice makes perfect. If fishing sometimes goes unrewarded, at least these bears still know how to have some fun. If these cubs manage to eat their fill, they'll grow up to weigh almost 400 kilograms of muscle and fur. They'll then be able to teach, in turn, the subtle art of fishing to their offspring, thereby ensuring the survival of their species. Being born, growing up, reproducing and dying, and then relinquishing our flesh to nourish the environment that sustained us. Such is the universal and eternal cycle of life. Imagine a place where that cycle occurs away from prying eyes. A place forgotten by the rest of the world, where wild nature still reigns supreme over all living things. A benevolent ruler whose laws dictate when the sun will rise and when it will set. Imagine a place where time is marked by the rhythm of the waves, by the beating of the wings of birds, or the blows of whales. That place actually exists, here in the Great Bear Rainforest. For thousands of years, life has been perpetuating itself, unbeknownst to the rest of the world. The virginal purity of this secret garden is like a haven of simplicity in a forever changing world. Between two clouds, you can sometimes spot some human or other come to cast a light on this Eden amidst the world of men.
You know, when we first came up here, it was known as the Mid-Coast Timber Supply Area. It was really just seen as a place to extract raw resources. And there was no other non-government organization working on conservation issues here. It was wide open. And this is a coastline that I've been exploring for 20 plus years, and I realized that I would have to live many more lifetimes to fully see it all. It's that large of a wilderness area. It's special on so many levels. You know, globally, there's just few coastlines that are associated with a huge island archipelago, such as we have here, that support many globally rare species. Our work is primarily wildlife conservation. It's really important to build public support for protecting such a large area. So we get involved in public education projects such as films and books and popular magazine articles, that sort of thing. So, film work and photography and really, visual storytelling.
Yeah, they could be around the corner, or sometimes when the tide drops, they can access fish down lower. They're not far.
This is interesting.
Oh, wow.
So you can see this is all from wolves lying down, pups playing. See how it's all kind of over there. But this is black bear here, which is very interesting. One less black bear. They don't really like bears in their fishing spots. They claim certain areas where they fish, and if a bear comes in, they'll often attack it. Goal today is to document fishing behavior, which is quite an important part of our work, trying to understand the importance of salmon to numerous species, but wolves in particular.
That is a high definition PTZ camera, which the camera can, it's like you're standing here and you're looking around, you can zoom all over the estuary. So that information is being transmitted back to our lab, where we're streaming it online and recording it in high quality as well. And we're watching it there, and we're kind of putting that out to the world so people can kind of connect with this area and what's happening at this time of year.
We're just sitting at 6.5 and 6.5 now, so maybe where it was.
I put it back to where it was there.
Okay, I'll just give it a second, see what happens here.
If this thing loads, you can see actually what it looks like when we're controlling the camera. It's going pretty slow right now, so I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. A lot of wolves, especially in this area, are kind of what we're mainly looking for, but you'll find just incredible bird life through here. Lots of eagles hanging out often, a whole bunch of ravens. Sometimes we get some bears and things like that too, and just being able to watch the salmon kind of move through this river too is pretty phenomenal. So it's pretty useful for us for monitoring wildlife. It's good enough that we can get a really good understanding of what the animals are doing in the area. Yeah, that's happening right now. So there's a salmon right there, swimming around. You can see them there. There's a couple of them. It's something you don't necessarily come across every day in your life, to be able to interact with animals in kind of their environment in that way. So it's another nice thing I like about this job.
By photographing and filming, documenting these animals and this place, we're able to essentially make people aware of its existence, and secondly, make them fall in love with it, and thirdly, want to do everything they can to protect it. So I think it's an extremely powerful way to bring people in. I mean, can you imagine if the entire world was a concrete jungle, and we seem to have forgotten that we're from places like these, and this is where we used to live, and we used to live by catching fish and off of these resources. So there's this disconnect with nature, but we need this habitat as much as the animals do. Just because we don't rely on it anymore doesn't mean it isn't essential for our existence.
Damien and Francois Xavier have met up in Carmanah-Walbrand Forest, west of Vancouver Island. This old-growth forest represents the last stage of the Pacific salmon cycle. In this rainforest, reminiscent of the Amazon jungle, roads are rare and bridges even rarer. However, the team is getting help from a couple of first-rate guides. Andy McKinnon is a renowned Canadian botanist. Matthew Beattie is an arborist, specializing in climbing giant trees. Together, they'll try to climb one of the oldest trees in the area in order to explore its canopy.
Lashing rainfall, 3 days straight. Just today, we must have gotten at least 60 millimeters of rain, if not more.
Oh, it's a beautiful rainforest rain, Francois. And this is in the summertime. This is what it's like when it's dry in the rainforest.
We should come back have a look when it's humid. How high do the trees come up to here?
Oh, we're gonna see a couple above 200 feet for sure.
200, okay. How do you get the first rope up the tree?
We're gonna be using this Big Shot. It's a tool we use in the industry for installing pilot lines. And
whoa, look at this tree.
Oh, wow. That could be the one, Damien.
That might be the one. Yeah.
Wow, look at the life up there.
Yeah, it's so massive.
Now that's a magnificent tree. A western red cedar, perhaps 800 to 900 years old at a minimum.
Lots of little moss beds around too.
Yeah, there's lots of life up in that canopy. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's got everything we're looking for.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
Perfect.
While Damien and Matthew get ready to climb the tree, Andy and Francois Xavier will continue exploring the rainforest.
To me, the most impressive thing about this forest is its size. The sheer size of these giant trees as we make our way through the forest.
Andy, I think the most impressive about this forest is its size, right? How come the trees are so big?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that here on the west coast, they can grow practically year-round if the temperature doesn't get too cold.
Right.
So they're evergreen trees, so they get plenty of moisture for growth. The tropical rainforests have similar amounts of total annual rainfall, but in terms of biomass, there are no ecosystems on Earth that come close to these coastal temperate rainforests.
Oh, really? We see a lot of young trees, but also very old trees.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's one of the characteristics of old-growth forests that sets them aside from the managed second-growth forests. The old-growth forests have a relatively small number of stems per hectare, usually, but they come in all sizes and ages, and some are alive and some are dead. And so they provide habitat for a wide range of different organisms. So if you go to a forest that has been cut down and replanted or regenerated naturally, what you generally find is a forest very simplified structurally and very simplified biologically compared to the richness that we see in an old-growth forest.
What's going on, Matt?
Meantime, Damien and Matt have come up against a huge setback. The part of the tree where Matt started climbing turned out to be dead. it just emitted a loud crack under the climber's weight.
So it looks like the tree's a bit unstable? Well, yeah, I mean, we definitely knew that, but oh, yeah, it went all the way up too. Remember I was saying how some trees just give you that impression that they don't want to be climbed. I think we're making a good call by considering another specimen somewhere. So you all heard it though? It wasn't just me?
No, I didn't hear anything.
Yeah.
I think
you guys. Yeah, we've got other options.
And what I find fascinating in these forests is the relationships between all these different species.
Oh, yes. Yeah, they're certainly all connected in the forests here. You can talk about these sorts of relationships, these connections above ground. Some of the more interesting connections, I think, are below ground. All of the plants that we see in the forest here, about 94% of plants on Earth, have fungi associated with their roots. And these fungi, their little filaments, go through the soil, and they gather water and minerals for the plants. And the plants photosynthesize, make sugars, and send the sugars down to their roots to help feed the fungi. Trying to find some roots that might have some indication of it here. So if you look at the tips of the roots here, you'll see that the very tips of the roots there are white. You see that?
Yeah.
And that is the fungi wrapped around the root tips. And from there, the microscopic threads would spread through the soil, gather water and minerals, and bring them back to the plant root, because availability of nitrogen is the thing that's limiting growth in these forests. So to the extent that these fungi can help gather nitrogen and make it available to the plants, then the plants will grow more quickly. So there aren't really that many sources of nitrogen for the forests here. But if you're near a river like this in the coastal temperate rainforest, probably your major source of nitrogen for tree growth is salmon. The tree that we are going to climb, there will be nitrogen from the salmon in that tree.
From the ocean to the river, and from the river to the very tops of the trees of the forest, the salmon have finally reached the end of their long journey. Through their incredible destiny, they've created a crucial link between the ocean and the 1,000-year-old trees of the forest. Our two friends have made their way through this lost world, the mysterious canopy of the rainforest. These tall and well-rooted trees literally act as the spinal columns of the world. Their leaves collect energy from the sun to the great benefit of all earthly creatures, all the while releasing torrents of water into the atmosphere. Their branches and trunks harbor a host of animals, insects, and plants. The trees of this forest are among the oldest creatures on the planet. Their lives go back far longer than ours, and far longer than our human experience and collective memory. Trees are remarkable beings.
Damien, wait till you see this moss mat here, brother. Beautiful.
Can't wait. It's massive.
Yeah, check this out. Come up a bit. It's a couple feet thick. Like the soil accumulation is just incredible.
Oh, wow.
It's actually quite an impressive size huckleberry growing out of it too. It's been there for a while. It's brilliant.
So there's quite a few different species growing on this tree already.
Yeah, that's right. It's really metaphoric of an apartment complex of all sorts of species. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And there's that interconnectedness, that interdependency of old growth forests where, you know, the network of species really rely upon one another. And so you take an important link out and it'll potentially disrupt the rest of the functions of the ecosystem.
The tree that Damien and Matt are exploring is over 1,000 years old. 1,000 years ago, the Inca civilization hadn't yet arisen, and Constantinople had yet to fall. When Christopher Columbus set foot on American soil, this tree was already a nearly 500-year-old giant. These great trees are guardians of time. They've seen civilizations come and go. They've seen men being born only to die soon afterwards. The rainforest, like the rest of nature, imposes humility and respect on the human race. But as Matthew Beattie put it, the mighty forest must also grapple with immense vulnerability, like a giant with brittle bones, and mankind has the power to either destroy it or protect it. From the bottom of the oceans to the highest peaks, the Earth has been explored, mapped out, and classified. But there remains a place beyond the limits of the known world, of which we barely know anything. A place where one can still entertain dreams of exploration, the underground world. Adventurers Damien and Francois are about to join up with a caving expedition in the center of British Columbia. The challenge that awaits them on the high limestone plateaus is no less than beating the Canadian record for the deepest cave. To accompany them on this underground adventure, they've invited Belgian caver Nicolas Borchers. It's a solid team for a gigantic enterprise.
Here we go! We are off on another adventure. Seems this isn't your first time exploring a cave together.
Yeah, we actually met in a cave. We were 15. Yeah, it's been a while, huh?
Yeah, and it was on the other side of the planet.
It's crazy.
Just incredible.
The final destination for our three adventurers, White Rabbit Cave. At 450 meters deep, it's the 5th deepest in Canada. But the exploration team waiting for them on site think they've found a way to surpass 1,000 meters. And at the same time, beat the North American record by over 400 meters for depth.
Welcome.
Kirk?
Yeah.
Fix. Nice to meet you.
Biologist Kirk Safford, expedition leader, welcomes the team to the base camp. They're pied de terre for the next 10 days.
How was the flight?
Yeah, it was brilliant. I love that turn just before the landing.
Yeah.
Without wasting a minute, the adventurers are briefed on the exploration plan.
And the depth potential is over a kilometer.
Well, the whole drop all the way down is, you can't see the top of it, really hard to see.
Yeah.
So all the way down, it's narrow, but it's really super high.
One type of rock in particular allows for the existence of vast underground worlds, limestone. Limestone covers nearly 10% of the planet's surface and harbors the vast majority of caves. Limestone is composed of minerals mainly derived from the skeletal remains of marine organisms and former coral reefs. Indeed, these cliffs were formed at the bottom of the ocean. Once pushed out of the water by tectonic forces, these rocks were assailed by the forces of nature, like wind and rain, by erosion, in other words. Rivers that flow over limestone have a nasty habit of disappearing. The water flows as far down as the rock will allow it. Once it reaches harder layers, it changes course and meanders along its merry way to the heart of the mountain. Over time, the water ends up digging a maze of tunnels that sometimes spreads out over kilometers. Caves are much more than just a series of dark passageways. Even in the most extreme environments, life always finds a way to take root. And caves are no exception. It's one more reason for humans to explore the world beneath their feet.
We need 2 lights, right?
Yeah, your headlamp and an emergency light.
Apparently the cavers explored 2 caves that might be connected.
Exactly. 2 caves. They first explored White Rabbit Cave.
The famous White Rabbit?
That's the lower cave with the huge entrance.
Okay.
They weren't able to find the end of it, but they found another cave higher up, which they christened Over the Hill.
So we'll explore the lower cave while the other team explores the top one. And we're hoping to meet up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Problem is, we'll need to dive to go from one cave to the other. There's a sump.
Okay.
It's up to the diving team to dive and try to get to the known part of White Rabbit Cave.
Excellent. It's a huge challenge, eh?
Yeah.
I think FX took the food.
Yeah, he did.
Okay, perfect.
I think we're getting closer.
What makes you say that?
The place fits the description the cavers gave us. We're in this marshy area. They told us to walk towards the skyline until we got to a cliff with a river running through it. You see that limestone band? The white band?
Yeah?
Well, if we just follow it, it will lead us directly to the cave entrance.
Oh, so we just have to follow the direction of that layer. Ah, the branches are whipping my face. Can you get through?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, it's a jungle.
Wow. Isn't that amazing?
Wow, incredible.
It's kind of intimidating.
Intimidating is the word, all right.
White Rabbit is one of the crown jewels of Canadian caving. The gaping mouth of this rock giant swallows up the river that our 3 adventurers were following. They now plunge into darkness without really knowing what awaits. Cavers may always know when they enter an underground world, but they rarely know when they'll re-emerge from it.
So what kind of rock is this, Nicolas?
Actually, FX, all the major caves are made of limestone. Limestone is slightly soluble, when the water is a bit acidic, that is. So it allows the water to dig the galleries and caves that we're now climbing down into.
How old is this cave, Nicholas?
The caves in the Rocky Mountains are several 100,000 years old. I mean, their formation began way back then.
And it took forever, eh?
Absolutely. And it's still happening. You hear that river? It's still doing its work. To give you an idea, when this cave began to be formed, Homo sapiens didn't yet walk the earth. So it all starts with water. Rainwater, to be more precise. And when that rainwater falls, it will go through the ground, absorb carbon dioxide, or CO2, which will make it slightly acidic.
Et ça va la rendre légèrement acide. You mean the CO2 that's emitted by the roots of plants?
Exactly, and by the breathing of the organisms in the soil. So the soil is fairly rich in CO2, and that CO2 will dissolve in the water when the rainwater penetrates into the ground.
So CO2 plus H2O
equals carbonic acid. It's not a very strong acid, but over time, carbonic acid can erode limestone. This erosion doesn't happen overnight, of course, but like we said earlier, the caves are several hundreds of thousands of years old. So over time, erosion can lead to the formation of huge caves.
It's too dark. Should we shine a light?
Good idea.
Good idea. Let there be light.
Oh, much better.
We can see where we're going now. Wow, it's still treacherous though.
Speaking of cave formations, you sometimes see stalactites and stalagmites. How exactly are these formed?
For stalagmites and stalactites, it's sort of the reverse process of the cave formation we discussed earlier. Remember what happens when water combines with carbonic acid?
Yes.
It will dissolve the limestone. Now imagine the rainwater making its way through the rocks and emerging here, over you and the roof. When it comes into contact with the cave's atmosphere, it will lose its carbonic acid. It's like when you open a bottle of sparkling water. The bubbles escape. Since the water contains less carbonic acid, it can't hold as much as limestone. And that limestone is redeposited. And that's how stalagmites and stalactites are formed.
Well, I think the question on everyone's lips is, why do people explore caves?
There's millions of reasons, but I think the main drive is curiosity. When you're standing before the gaping mouth of a cave, you wonder what's behind it, how far it goes. I think that's what motivated the first explorers.
Well, I think it's been like that since the dawn of man. We've always been curious to see further, and science and exploration have always gone hand in hand.
And it's not over. The first explorers were most often scientists, and it's still the case today.
It's an amazing symbiosis between science and exploration.
Many of today's cavers are geologists, hydrologists, and even biologists.
It becomes fascinating when you bring biology into it. Few people would imagine that there's life in a cave, but there's a whole biological world here.
Exactly. It's not only rock. For example, in this handful of sand, there could be bacteria and microorganisms that we know very little about.
Caves are the kingdoms of arthropods. Arthropods are champions when it comes to adapting. In the near total absence of light and food, along with bacteria and fungi, to establish a complete underground ecosystem. Mammals, too big and energy-guzzling, are usually excluded from this small world. But one remarkable mammal is an exception to the rule. These biologists have come here in the middle of a Rockies winter to find bats.
There's a bat just up here on the wall.
The biologists are looking for the carcasses of bats rather than living bats, yet they hope not to find any. Dead bats might be a sign of a European-born disease known as white nose syndrome. The epidemic hasn't yet reached Alberta, but some say it's only a matter of time.
It's just really weird, there's white there. Yeah. Just not seeing anything on the muzzle. I think we should open the wing up and see if there's any damage on the wing. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's even worthwhile having it tested.
Well,
there is some white substance on the wing, which is unusual. And it's concerning in that white nose is a fungal infection that affects the wings as well as the face.
I've never seen this before. It was hibernating, and it's come out of that now. It's waking up, and that's the big cost of the white nose syndrome, the fungus that gets into their deep muscle tissues. They just keep waking up through the winter until they have no more energy left, and then they die that way. So.
Our biologists would end up concluding that the fungus found on the wings of the bat was not white nose syndrome. If it had been, it would have been disastrous for Canada's bat populations. When the disease reaches a colony, the chances for survival are near zero.
24th of January, 2013. On the snow here, we found some dead bats and some blind bats, like that one, just stuck, frozen, with its back of its head to the snow, right there. And there's the one there in the snow, it just flew over from the cliff face. You can see the one down here, it's basically right there, it's crawling around. Ah, poor buggers. Oh yeah, littered. Dead bats here everywhere. Dozens and dozens of them. All the way down here.
As of its 2006 detection in the state of New York, the fungus which causes white nose syndrome spread across North America at dazzling speed. It crossed the border in 3 years. In 10, it reached 31 states and 5 Canadian provinces. The bat colonies were exterminated one by one without anyone knowing how to stop it.
As far as we can tell, white nose syndrome has caused the fastest decline of wild mammals that's ever been recorded. Millions of bats have died all throughout eastern North America. So our team is doing counts at these colonies all across central Canada. That's really useful data for us that give us a snapshot of the health of the population, and then we can monitor trends in the population over time as the fungus comes through.
So I see one in the second chamber. He doesn't love this light though.
Paul is putting up a funnel trap, and so what we're hoping is that the bats are going to jump out of their house into the bag thinking they can get through the bottom, but then they'll be trapped inside. It'll be really easy, and you just take the bag off and just pull them right out of the bag.
While Kaylee and her students get ready to conduct a series of tests on the captured bats, the rest of Dr. Willis's team are assigned with taking the count of a nearby bat box. It's a game of patience and concentration. When the moths start coming out, their biggest predator is never very far away.
We're hearing a lot of activity in there now, so it should start picking up soon. There's one. Whoop.
And so begins the bat ballet. Through the miracle of evolution, bats are the only mammals in the world that can fly. This unique trait has allowed them to diversify like no other. There are about 1,300 bat species in the world. 1 out of every 5 mammal species is a bat. These are called little brown bats. This species can live up to 45 years, quite a feat for an animal this size. And females only give birth to 1 pup per year. In fact, these traits are closer to a bear's than to a mouse's. And like bears, bats hibernate for a large part of the year, and that's where things get complicated.
During hibernation, an average little brown bat in central Canada has to survive for up to 8 months on about 2 grams of stored fat. To do that, they have to slow their metabolism right down. They slow body temperature down to just above freezing. But there's something about being a mammal and being cold for weeks and weeks on end that's incompatible. And so bats, about every 3 weeks, a healthy bat will spend a ton of energy, a ton of its winter fat, shivering and shivering to warm up to a normal body temperature for about 2 hours. One of those arousals for 2 hours costs about 3 weeks of fat. So if you're doing that too often, that could easily explain how they're running out of fat too quickly and how they're dying. And it's now clear from a number of experiments that that's what's going on. Something's happening as this fungus grows into the skin that causes bats to warm up too much.
Before in this cave, we could count 600 to 800 bats before the syndrome set in. But after the white nose syndrome, the count went down to about 75. That's almost a 90% drop in the population here. But part of the population seems to be surviving. Between 1 and 10% of individuals. We've noted that at the moment, the populations are starting to slowly bounce back.
We take a sample and we put it in a test tube.
That goes back to the lab. We'll send the samples to the University of Montreal lab so that Virginie Lemieux-Lamonté can analyze them. What she's looking at is the variety of organisms present on the bat's skin.
Some bats are surviving, but we don't yet know why. Given that the immune system is less active during the hibernation period, we're not favoring that hypothesis. However, the microbiome could be acting while the bat is hibernating. And we know that skin microorganisms evolve a lot faster than the genome of a species. In the populations that we studied that had survived, when we compared them with non-affected bats, we saw an enrichment in a certain bacteria that had the potential to fight white nose syndrome. We observed that in several individuals, so it seems to be a general trend. At the moment, there are several treatments and methods being considered to fight the fungus. We've isolated bacteria directly on the skin of the bats, and those were used to cure the disease. Chemical products have been considered, but we obviously haven't yet applied those treatments in the field because introducing something like that might cause an even worse imbalance.
Besides the huge practical constraints of a general treatment, we know the damage humans can do when playing chemist. Treating the colonies is therefore not yet an option. But Dr. Willis's team is on another lead.
That was very easy. We're going to take it to get weighed. We're going to swab its wings for white nose syndrome. We're going to take pictures of its wings if there's any damage. We're also going to take a small genetic sample and microchip that individual as well.
Yeah, we have boxes like that.
The reason that we punch holes is because we're taking a genetic sample. So one of the things that we want to understand through our studies is what makes a bat likely to survive white nose syndrome and what doesn't. And the process looks a little bit brutal, but it does heal up within 10 to 14 days. We don't like to cause them any harm, but it's kind of a pinch for the greater good, I guess.
We think one of the most likely traits that might be important for helping them survive is how fat they get in the fall. Those kinds of traits are heritable. So fat mother and father bats will tend to have fat baby bats. And if that trait is heritable and the fungus is selecting for bats that had the largest fat reserves at the beginning of hibernation, then evolution might be the answer to our problem. In conservation biology, we refer to that as evolutionary rescue. And in that situation, anything you can do to improve the survival and especially reproduction of individuals that have made it through your challenge, your human impact that's caused the decline, is going to help your population recover.
Some wing scarring. And it's a female. She's pregnant. You can definitely see the bulge for sure.
And so we've been testing how improving the habitats that mother bats use to raise their pups might help populations rebound and recover. We've known for decades that mother bats really like warm summer roost sites. And so We're actually artificially heating bat boxes to try and encourage occupation of bats in enhanced habitat and help populations recover. It's really an approach based on helping evolution.
So that is where she would have had some white nose syndrome growing on her that has eaten away at the tissue, and now she has a big scar there.
One of the things I'm always asked is why people should care about bats. One of the reasons I think they're important is that they're just cool and interesting and unusual, and they do bizarre things, but they're also ecologically and economically important animals.
Because they eat so many insects, bats are of great service to humans, especially in the agri-food sector. The collapse of bat populations has already cost the industry several $1 billion worth of pesticides. It's yet another example of our dependence on nature. Now we can only hope, like Dr. Willis, that evolution will work its magic on the species. In White Rabbit Cave, FX has met up with expedition leader Kirk Safford. Meanwhile, Damien and Nicholas will continue exploring the cave.
Oh, it's a tight squeeze, Damien.
We're going through there?
Yeah, man.
You sure?
If I get stuck, you'll put me up on my feet?
Okay, it's a deal.
So, like breakfast today?
We'll soon find out. Some butter might come in handy.
You realize we have a better knowledge of the surface of Mars and the ocean depths than we do of caves. We've mapped out Mars. We even have a knowledge of the ocean depths, even of underwater canyons. But we have no way of knowing where unexplored caves are located on the planet. And the only way to learn about them is by exploring them directly, by squeezing through little holes like this.
Speaking of Mars, I never thought about going there, but the idea seems more and more appealing.
Can't be worse than here.
No, it can't.
Can you believe that there are thousands of places like this, just waiting to be discovered?
Tons of tiny spaces like this.
Whole world of horrendous little holes just waiting to be discovered by us? I think it's amazing.
I appreciate your passion, Nico.
Okay, I'm out.
You got through?
Yeah, a really tight squeeze.
And we're going back this way?
Naturally.
Great.
It's too late now. You're on the other side. Going through that narrow space was really worth it.
Wow.
Look how beautiful it is.
Is that marble?
Yeah, white marble.
Yeah, definitely worth it.
Let's just not think about the return.
Not yet. So what's up next?
I think we've arrived at the terminal. You remember all the unexplored zones Kirk showed us on the map?
Marked out with question marks?
Yeah, exactly. And get out the map and check.
Okay, it'd be nice to know where we are.
Think we're lost? Look, we came in through here. That's the main tunnel entrance.
Yeah?
Then we walked as far as here. So I think we're right here.
Oh, there, by the question marks.
Exactly.
So all of this is unexplored?
Yeah, all these question marks. We don't know what's out there.
Great.
You can pick one and we'll check it out.
How about that one?
That one?
Shall we?
Let's do it.
Nico, it's incredible to think that no one's ever set foot here.
Yeah, it's nuts to think that every time you explore a new gallery, that it was waiting there in the dark and silence for hundreds of thousands of years. Then suddenly, we turn our headlamps on and here we are.
Yeah, at the heart of the mountain.
It's incredible.
It's like there's two types of rock here.
Yeah, isn't it beautiful? You see that white rock underneath? That's the base of the cave. It's marble, in fact.
The black and white layers?
Exactly. Those black streaks, like in your bathroom.
I wish.
That's marble. And this bottom layer is impermeable. Water ran over this layer and eroded the limestone above, creating that meander where those two rocks meet. We can clearly see it here.
So the cave follows this layer of marble, and we're at the bottom of that layer.
Exactly. The whole cave follows the marble layer. We're always on that interface.
Excellent. Shall we keep going and see what's ahead?
Now that we've discovered this new gallery, Damon, we'll have to make a map.
So we'll record everything we explored on a map?
Exactly. Here's a disto for the distances, the notebook, and the other instruments. I suggest you take the instruments and I'll record the data in the notebook. The principle of topography is simple. It's a very basic science. We'll divide the gallery into segments and we'll measure the length of each segment, its direction and slope. We'll take those measurements for each segment and we'll jot them all down. And we can recreate the cave in 3D once on the surface. Okay, the station's right here, so aim for my hand. Not my eyes if possible.
6.65 meters?
6.65. 66. So far, so good. Exploration and map making have always gone hand in hand. When you think about sailors of bygone days who set sail for unknown worlds, when they discovered a new shore, it was important to map it out, so the next sailors wouldn't crash against the same reef.
It's like a legacy for future explorers.
Yeah, and that still holds true for modern-day caving. If you go back to the surface and tell your team, I found a gallery, if you don't bring back topographical data, it'll be pointless. No one will be able to find the gallery and push the exploration further.
It's probably even more crucial for the divers who will try to connect the two caves today.
Yeah, absolutely. Our divers will need to know exactly where they're headed, the distance from the sump to dive, and a map will give them the exact distance between the two caves.
10 years of dogged exploration have revealed over 5 kilometers of galleries under the mountain, and not one but 2 caves, just 400 meters apart. It's only by connecting them that cavers will be able to claim a depth record. But as nothing is easy underground, the suspected passage is flooded. The only conceivable option is to dive. This year, an American cave diver has come to lend the team a hand. His objective is simple: to dive through the sump and connect the 2 caves. Jason disappears into the freezing cold water without the faintest idea of what he'll find there. He's the first human to come through here. In 2-degree water and with extremely narrow passageways, the task proves difficult with a slim chance of success. If the mission were to succeed, the 2 caves would become one, thus becoming the deepest in all of Canada and the US.
Kirk, you're a biologist for the government of BC.
That's correct.
As a biologist, what do you find so interesting about caves?
Well, I'm interested in caves overall and exploring caves and finding out where they go and what they do. the biology is a part of that. We really know very little about life inside these caves, so any chance I get, try and make some collections of the invertebrates. So I think we'll just look at some of the this woody debris here, and I can see there's some fungal mycelium growth, and we'll just take a look, and maybe I'll collect some samples here and see if there's anything in there.
Let's do that. Let me know how I can help you.
Sure, certainly.
So what are you hoping to find here?
Well, sometimes you'll get springtails or mites that will live in here. It's a small predator prey system. Very
basic, I guess.
Very basic, yeah.
So who's the predator?
The mites are predatory. They'll feed on the springtails, but there's a number of other things. There might be fungus gnats on some of this, which may or may not be cave adapted.
The little nutrients that arrive in the cave, they come from the surface usually.
Frequently, yes, and there's no primary production underground, so you don't have plants and no sunlight, and so.
And no sunlight means no plants, means no food.
That's right. There'll be some energy from, the bacteria can probably create, when they, like I say, they live off the limestone, they can.
So chemical.
It's part of the chemical reaction. They help create the flowstone, and there may be some species that live off those bacteria as well. So for this station, if you can put that back there, and we'll move on to another spot.
All things considered, studying microscopic insects at the bottom of a cave may seem altogether futile. But these two cavers will prove the contrary. They're known as citizen scientists. They've put their exploration talents to the service of science. With microbiologist Anne Cheatham, they might be on the verge, no more, no less, of redefining the medicine of tomorrow.
That's it, eh? That's it. Wow, look how low the snow is.
Oh, it's always impressive.
Yeah, it's a big hole in the ground. Got all your screws, lots of screws. And the scientific gear, that's right.
The first thing that hit a lot of people when we step into the cave would be, oh my God, it's so dark. Darkness. What does it mean in the biological context? It means that there is no photosynthesis, there is no primary producer, which means the first cell that could give energy to other organisms in the same ecosystem. Basically, it's almost a starving environment in there, but you see a lot of lives. And then it dawned on me, how do these organisms actually make ends meet? So it means that they must have adapted and evolved so that they can live and thrive in that habitat. So I'm thinking, okay, they must have very interesting metabolic ability, which could mean that they could be, the producer of a number of interesting and less studied molecules that we can extract and use as either drugs, antibiotics, or anything. So basically, when we want cave soil samples, some caving communities might, have a new expeditions going into the type of caves that never been in before, and they will call my lab and say, hey, Anne, would you like to study these cave samples or not?
Bacteria are integral to our lives, like no other organism. The vast majority are indispensable to life on Earth. Others, however, can cause disease or poison or kill us. Luckily, humans discovered antibiotics, which allowed them to ward off these infections. But today, the situation is again changing. In Montreal, in the winter of 2016, 25 people contracted a new type of bacterial infection. These patients died because no antibiotic could save them. Superbacteria had entered the scene.
Using antibiotics saves human lives, so they're important and necessary. But the widespread use of antibiotics will cause bacteria to fight back, too. Their goal in life is to multiply, so they have to develop mechanisms to try to foil the antibiotics that have been developed. It's natural selection, meaning that there's a selective advantage for antibiotic-resistant bacteria. To counter that, we developed even more powerful antibiotics. But yes, there are still cases now in Canada and in the world of bacteria that no antibiotic can kill.
The arms race was thus launched. Though alternative methods were developed, the scientific community is certain of one thing. We quickly need new types of antibiotics. And Ann Cheatham thinks she may know where to find them.
You know, strangely enough, majority of antibiotics actually, believe it or not, come from microorganisms found in nature. And I strongly believe that we still have to go back to the nature and find that molecules in the nature. I would like to see whether microorganisms that live in extreme habitats would be able to produce new molecules for us that we can use as antibiotics.
It's quite fascinating to see this huge hole in the side of the mountain. And from the entrance, you can't tell, but about one rope length in, all of a sudden you see this beautiful blue ice with these humongous ice pillars and columns halfway down. And the ice in this cave is phenomenal. I remember when we first came into the cave, it really struck me how clear it was, because when you're traveling around, your headlamps are shining into the ice and you can see rocks and bubbles buried 2-3 meters deep in the ice, and which is a bit disconcerting when you're walking on it. It's like walking on water. I love exploration. I love the idea of going somewhere no one has ever been. And so luckily this cave was able to offer that. You know, I've got to see a piece of the world that no human's ever been to, and that's pretty rare nowadays.
It's just an amazing thing to be an amateur at doing scientific work, but yet to be able to contribute to the scientific community by either collecting samples or by being an explorer or going to a new place that no human has ever been. And to be able to share any results that you find with the scientific community is just the gravy on top.
Yeah, so weird to see snow down here after all that ice. Yeah, this actually looks pretty good because it looks like it's deep enough that we can dig down, which is what we'll need to do. So we've got these sterile instruments we can use to dig. So we can start digging just around there. Can use the end of that. We'll see what might be living here.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if she's had any success finding organic or bacteria in other samples from other caves?
Oh yeah, for sure. So some of the samples that we did in some of the other caves, they were able to isolate a bunch of new bacteria that had never been observed before. And of those, they had some success in testing them against a drug-resistant strain of staph infection.
I really like the color. This one is from what cave again?
This is from this
White
seven
Rabbit.
caves, White Rabbit caves.
White Rabbit caves, yeah. When you observe, we call it clear zone here or inhibitory zone here, which means that these cave bacteria producing metabolites that can kill the bad bacteria that we use to test. So in this set of 20-some cave bacteria that we test, we actually found this one and this one that show potential activities, and from now we're going to do secondary screening. We will grow these bacteria in large amount and then test them further to see whether this would be a good candidate for new antimicrobial activities. It could take minimum of 10 years to 25 years the most to actually make this compound from the lab right now into a commercially available antibiotic for everyone to use. Even though I know that, there's still a long road ahead of me, but just to see that spot in the plate is kind of, you can never forget that feeling.
Two happy cavers emerge from the ice cave. For them, it's mission accomplished. At White Rabbit, however, the situation isn't as sunny. After advancing for half an hour, Jason faces the nightmare of all cave divers: atrocious visibility, a steep and unstable sand slope, and a space barely 30 centimeters high to slip through. When it's a choice between the mission and safety, it's an easy decision. The diver makes a U-turn.
Well, that was short. Got about 50 to 70 meters of passage, and it goes up and down a couple of canyons, and then at the end it comes up into a sand slope that's it's right at the angle of repose. So as soon as you touch it, the sand collapses in on top of you, and it's probably 2-3 inches high. So that's it, huh? Well, time's gone like everything else went. What's that? Got into a 30 feet deep, and at the bottom turned into a collapsing sand slope with about 2 inches of clearance at the top.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, as soon as I touched it, it went and started burying me. I'm like, oh no, we're out of here.
Wow.
So it didn't connect.
Well, there you go. That is
Okay.
significant. Even if it didn't go, the fact that we know is...
Yeah.
I really didn't know what to expect. It would have been awesome if it had kept on going, but at the same time, I knew there was little chance of that. Just the fact that we know that it's no longer an option, that we can't get there underwater, means that we can now move on to other things. So it does count for something, just the fact of knowing.
Hey, you guys did a great job exploring this place. Nice passageway.
FX, Nicholas, and Damien have reached the deepest section of the cave. Along the way, they also found the river they'd left at the cave entrance. When a river runs underground, you rarely come out dry.
I have a lighter? Oh, wait, I have one.
Great teamwork.
Perfect. C'est It's quite a feeling finding ourselves down here, huh?
Yeah, it would take several hours to get back to the surface.
Yeah, the distance isn't that much, in fact. In a beeline, we're only a few hundred meters from the exit.
But we'll have to backtrack all day tomorrow. Through all those narrow spaces.
Back up the waterfall.
Yeah, that's the undertaking. Contrary to popular belief, caving isn't an extreme sport. It isn't a dangerous sport. It's actually relatively safe. But if something happens, if you sprain an ankle or break an arm down here, yeah, it's very hard to get out.
A chopper can't come rescue you at the bottom of the cave.
No, it's not like in the mountains.
Not bad.
It's nuts how everything tastes good underground. Yeah, actually, I'd never eat this at home.
I don't think I'd appreciate it that much on the surface.
You guys ever sleep an entire night in a hammock?
I don't know.
Never in a cave.
I don't like the look of this.
It's the end of a long day of exploration for our three adventurers.
I'm wrapped up like a sausage.
Cut off from the outside world by hundreds of meters of rock, they're settling in for a good night's sleep in the total darkness of the underground world.
Oh man, the ceiling's just gorgeous.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
The hallways of White Rabbit are again plunged in darkness and silence.
Hey, good night, guys.
Good night, guys. I wonder what they're doing up there.
The Great Canadian Wilderness, where water and vegetation rule their domain. It's hard to imagine that in the past, the landscape looked more like this. Once upon a time, volcanoes had free reign over this land. Then how was nature able to create such abundance from a heap of smoking ash? That's the great story of life. While volcanoes in Canada are a treasure jealously kept hidden by nature, they are still responsible for some of the most enchanting landscapes. But these volcanic gems, concealed with natural expanses, are accessible only to the most adventurous. The Uncharted Canada team set out to discover the volcanoes of British Columbia. They're getting ready to embark on an almost 2,000-kilometer trek along the string of volcanoes that stretches across the province from north to south. Like Pinatubo in the Philippines, Krakatoa in Indonesia, and Mount St. Helens in the US, the volcanoes of BC are part of a gigantic belt of volcanoes circling the Pacific Ocean, known as the Ring of Fire. From the far south to the north of BC, the adventurers will embark on a trek that will take them through some of the most stunning volcanic sites. Starting from the Garibaldi Massif, they'll make a stop at Box Canyon, carved out of the lava. Discover Canada's most recent and deadliest lava flow, the Nisga's lava field, and end up at the Edziza volcano, a mountain sacred to the Tahltan people. This is Mount Garibaldi. From the outside, it looks like any other mountain. But inside, it's quite another story. The mountain, like most of the surrounding summits, is actually nothing but a fragile cap perched over the boiling cauldron that is our planet's core. We are 70 kilometers north of Vancouver, at the end of a chain of volcanoes extending from California to Canada, the Cascade Volcanic Arc.
Any of these volcanoes could erupt at any moment. With a surrounding population of over 10 million people, it's one of the most dangerous volcanic chains in the world. Mount Garibaldi and its neighbors are no exception. Our adventurers, Damien and Francois Xavier, begin their trek here on Black Tusk, a pinnacle in Garibaldi Provincial Park.
C'est juste que problem is, if one rock falls, I fall with it. Okay, Glenn, you can go.
Okay.
Careful the rock.
Yeah.
It's really crumbly. Whoa. What better introduction to our adventure than climbing the most famous peak in the area, which is, on top of it all, a classic example of a volcano. Climbing up towards me is volcanologist Glenn William Jones, who will accompany us throughout the adventure. At the summit, we'll meet up with Damien, who's in a plane rather than on foot. He'll be kind of like our eye in the sky as we explore this landscape. As we head north during our exploration of volcanism, we'll travel not only through space, but also through time, as we turn back the geological clock to the birth of our planet, but also to the origin of life. You okay?
Oh, yeah.
We're almost there, huh?
Hey, cool.
Congrats.
Excellent.
Quite the view, huh?
Oh, that's incredible. We can totally see everything. It really was worth it.
Look at the color of the lake.
Fix, do you read me?
Damien, I read you loud and clear, and I can even hear the sound of your engine.
I'm heading your way. What side of the Black Tusk are you on?
The south side.
I'll try to find you. It's amazing. The color of the lake is gorgeous today.
I think Glenn and I are a little jealous.
Absolutely.
Well, you earned the view way more than I did.
It's incredible. It's like the landscape was painted in black and white. It's a mix of ice and rock.
Yes, and that's characteristic of this part of the world. It's glacier-volcanism, and we're known for that in British Columbia. So there was an intrusion of magma, of molten rock beneath the ice. Basically, everything we see here dates to around the end of the last ice age, about 10 to 12,000 years ago.
There used to be much more ice here.
Yes, I mean, 12 to 13,000 years ago, you can see maybe 200 to 300 meters of ice above our head.
Right here?
Yeah.
Above our heads. Okay, so Mount Garibaldi was almost entirely covered in ice.
Yes, the ice would have been, at the level of the summits here.
At summit level. So all the mountains we see here are volcanoes.
Yeah, exactly.
That were formed under the ice.
Most of them.
So the lava comes out of the Earth's core?
From the crust.
And it meets the ice that melts instantly, I imagine.
It melts instantly in a super energetic, explosive reaction. And what's really interesting, if you look at Mount Garibaldi, it's a young volcano. Probably just 250,000 years old.
Okay.
But that formed under the ice. But a lot of it passed through the ice, and the ash and lava built up a large part of the structure that we see above the ice.
Above the ice?
Yes.
So when the ice disappeared at the end of the ice age, the volcano had no more foundation and collapsed?
Yes, and with gravity and time, all this will fall to pieces.
Do you read me, Fix?
Loud and clear, Damien. He's just to the left of the mountain, right across the glacier.
Beautiful. I'll head straight to the mountain.
Wow.
Wow, that's just incredible.
The Black Tusk is very well named. It's a real rock spur. I'm passing over Table Mountain. It's a strangely shaped mountain with a flat top.
The strangely shaped mountain Damien mentioned, just like Black Tusk, is a real specialty of Canadian volcanology. They're what are called tuyas. Once again, these shapes are a result of the titanic battle between ice and lava. As it rose to the surface, the lava melted a passage in the ice that was then solidified by the cold. It was only at the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago, that these otherworldly shaped peaks became exposed.
I have to say these geological scales are hard for lay people to wrap their heads around. You say 2 million years or 2 billion years?
Yeah, that's normal. Humans are recent and we don't live very long. But the Earth is 4.6 billion years old.
Yeah.
We're a blip in geologic history. But if you like, we could draw a scale. So, why not start here? This will be 4.6 billion years, right here.
Yeah?
So you go over to that mount. You'll be the modern age.
The present.
The present, exactly.
Works for me. I like this game.
My jacket will be 4.6 billion years ago.
The origin of the Earth?
The origin of the Earth. The next one will be our ancestors. 1.5 billion years ago.
So you just skipped over a period of 3 billion years.
Yeah, this is our first ancestor. A small bacteria in the ocean.
Okay.
Now we'll see something that everyone has heard about.
Oh, you're getting really close.
65 million years ago was the end of the dinosaurs.
Wow, okay.
So right here, it's the arrival of modern humans. So to make this easier to grasp, make the scale in 24 hours. Modern humans arrive at about 4 seconds before midnight.
Wow, okay. We're pretty recent.
Yeah, incredible.
And pretty insignificant.
Absolutely.
The dizzying immensity of geological time reduces humans to but a footnote in history. But shockingly, the volcanoes here aren't much older. The first North Americans colonized this land around 10,000 BC. So it's not that fanciful to imagine that humans could have had a front row seat when some of these rocky behemoths were formed. To understand the volcanoes of BC, we need to look to the sea. The Pacific Ocean is circled by a giant ring of volcanoes that constantly rattle the planet with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, from the Philippines to Chile, from Kamchatka to British Columbia. It's called the Ring of Fire. At the origin of this constant volcanic activity is the oceanic ridge. This is where the oceanic crust is formed. Magma rising from the Earth's core creates convection cycles that pull apart the oceanic plates at a rate of 4 centimeters per year. It's through this process that the continent moves. It's what's called plate tectonics. When the oceanic plate meets the continent, it dips down toward the Earth's core. As it travels downward, the rock melts, rises again to the surface, loaded with gas, pierces the continental crust, and causes an eruption. We're off Vancouver Island on the west coast of BC. This is the Juan de Fuca Ridge. It's responsible for the volcanism of a large part of the west coast. At a depth of close to 2,500 meters, it's one of the most inaccessible places on the planet. This ship, run by the Oceanic Research Institute, Ocean Networks Canada, is headed for the Juan de Fuca Ridge. In 2007, at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, the Institute set up the largest underwater ocean observation network in the world, the Neptune Network. With a fiber optic cable stretching over 800 kilometers, the Neptune Network is strategically located under the Juan de Fuca tectonic plate. Through instruments and sensors connected to the entire length of the network, scientists can observe the oceanic processes like never before.
We're like an astronomical telescope, a large facility used to observe the ocean and its physical, geological, and biological processes. We provide data from the entire network to scientists at universities throughout the world. This summer, we're getting ready to expand the network to the Endeavour Ridge. Since all the maintenance work on the network is done at extremely great depths, we need a robotic, remote-controlled submarine that works 24/7.
At nightfall, they reach the Juan de Fuca Ridge. 2.5 kilometers below the ship extends the volcanic site known as the Endeavour hydrothermal vents. It's the place farthest away from their network of instruments, and also the hardest to access. A long night's work begins for the Ocean Networks team. As the remote-controlled submarine heads toward the abyss of the underwater volcanic site, the Ocean Networks team observes a moving pageant. A series of creatures, from the commonest species to the strangest life forms, appear before their camera, like an open book of evolution. Extreme ocean depths remain to this day a profound mystery to scientists. Strangely enough, we seem to know more about outer space than the ocean depths, but it is possible to see a certain resemblance. At last, the submarine reaches the bottom. Before it, in the inky blackness of the ocean depths, the famous Endeavour hydrothermal vents come into view. Nowhere else in Canada can we feel closer to the Earth's core. Like surface volcanoes, the volcanic vents spit out burning hot clouds of smoke that raise the water temperature here to over 300 degrees Celsius. In such extreme conditions, it's easy to think that no life could emerge. But it's quite the opposite. Some suspect that life on Earth actually began here. The submarine robot of the Ocean Networks Canada Research Institute has reached the Endeavour hydrothermal vents on the Juan de Fuca Ridge. The big job of repairing and extending the Institute's research facilities starts at a depth of 2,500 meters.
Keith has one junction box out here with an extension cable back to RCM North.
Hydrothermal vents form when two oceanic plates separate from one another, which is the case at the Endeavour site, and magma rises to the surface. Buckling under the colossal pressure, the crust forms cracks, allowing water to leak down toward the mantle. Pushed by the high temperature and pressure, the water rises again to the surface, dissolving the surrounding minerals and rock, and, as with a volcanic eruption, projects debris into the ocean. As they cool down, the minerals precipitate and form vents. But the story doesn't end here, because as soon as the vents form, life emerges immediately.
It was a big surprise for researchers to discover that there could be ecosystems on Earth that were completely independent of the sun and photosynthesis. That completely changed our ideas about life on other planets, in our solar system, and elsewhere in the universe. It seems like a hostile environment where life is impossible, but it's a high-energy environment in a food desert. There's no food at 2,000 meters. It's very far from the surface, and there's very little to eat.
The solution that life found to the total absence of light and therefore photosynthesis around the hydrothermal vents is called chemosynthesis. With no access to solar energy, organisms use the chemical energy given off by the volcanic vents to transform CO2 to organic matter, just like with photosynthesis.
And that's what forms the basis of the food chain at the hot springs. Bacteria transform chemical energy into matter, into biomass, and the fauna there either eats bacteria directly or lives with it in symbiosis. There's a large abundance of worms that lack a mouth and a digestive system. They live entirely from the bacteria that live in symbiosis inside their bodies.
These worms of the depths absorb dissolved gases, such as H2S, CO2, and oxygen, using the red gills that adorn their upper bodies. The molecules penetrate into their circulatory system and are brought to the bacteria, which carry out the chemosynthesis reaction that feeds the worms. It's a wonderful example of what we call symbiosis, a collaboration between two species to adapt to their environment and allow for their survival.
Some researchers suggest that life on Earth actually began around thermal springs hundreds of millions of years ago. At that time, the surface of the Earth was quite hostile. It had no ozone layer, there were UV rays, it was bombarded by rubble from comets, and so on. But underwater, in the oceans, the environment was far more stable, and there was constant energy coming from the thermal springs. The springs acted as a kind of bioreactor. So, when the first molecules of life formed, they were allowed to recirculate in the environment, and this increased the possibility of meeting other molecules. And that's exactly what had to happen to form the first cells. These cells, once formed, then stayed in the environment to absorb minerals.
While volcanoes are mountains forged by fire, they often meet their end through water. In a volcano's young, shifting soil, the slightest stream can create dizzying voids. Falls. At the foot of the Garibaldi volcano, water is carved out of the layers of lava, a rocky cirque 70 meters high. Volcanoes are hastily built mountains and much more fragile than they look. Subjected to the laws of erosion, they don't resist the passage of time for long. One of the most striking examples of erosion can be found at a place those in the know call Box Canyon.
Watch out. You have to go easy here. It's incredible. As you move forward into the canyon, you really feel like you're going into the heart of the mountain. And the further we go, the more the jaws of rock close in over our heads. The amazing thing is that there are two completely different types of rock. Basalt to our left and granite to our right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the origins are actually really quite similar. These rocks formed by magma, but in the case of granite, the rock remained underground, whereas the basalt, it rose out of the ground onto the surface beneath our atmosphere.
So that's a big difference between basalt and granite. On one side we have lava that flowed from a volcano and cooled off by contact with the air, while the granite here is also magma, but but it rose up and stayed underground where it cooled off.
And it was probably, tens of kilometers underground.
How old is a rock like this?
This one here is about 100 million years old.
And that rock there?
And that one over there, about 10,000 to maybe 30,000 years old.
Which is the same age as Mount Garibaldi.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a clear difference here between the look of these two rocks.
Yeah, and the granite is really resistant. The minerals are extremely hard. Whereas if we look at the lava, the basalt, it's full of fractures, it breaks into chunks very easily. So you can see all those joints.
So all the rock missing from up there is under our feet.
Yeah, underneath our feet.
And that's why we're wearing helmets.
That's why we should move along.
That's a good idea. What's that rock?
This is where we enter Box Canyon. We'll rappel down with a rope, and Fix will be there to greet you in the pool. Spread your legs and lean backwards. We'll go bit by bit. It'll be fun.
Okay.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
All right then. Earlier we were saying that it felt like going down to the center of the earth. But this time it's real. Have you looked below?
No, not yet. Yeah, we'll see.
You'll see it soon.
If you were here, you'd see. It's pretty impressive. Okay, here we go.
Good?
Wow.
Hidden for millennia in dense vegetation, Box Canyon was discovered by canyoneers barely 2 years ago. Only a handful of adventurers can harness its secrets and its dangers. Anyone who enters Box Canyon is fully committed, since the only way out is to follow it downwards. Damien, Francois Xavier, and their guest, volcanologist Glyn Williams-Jones, have entered the canyon carved into the granite known as Box Canyon, only a few kilometers from the Garibaldi volcano.
This is excellent. It's incredible. Oh, yeah.
It's extremely impressive entering Box Canyon. The water flowing through that crack in the rock at an incredible speed, with incredible power. The air rumbles from the power of the waterfall. You really feel in the canyon at that point, at the center of the earth.
Going in for the first time, I thought, am I really going to be able to do this? I didn't have much rock climbing experience to speak of, and seeing that torrent of water, I wasn't sure it was going to end well.
There's no way to turn around once you're committed. You have to follow the waterway to the end, to the exit. And getting hurt in a canyon like this could have major consequences.
You really feel alone in the world in this place, and no one will come looking for you.
You're almost suspended in time, cut off from the world, and surrounded by these walls of granite and basalt. It's really beautiful.
The erosion there is just incredible. And you can see how it varies from one year to the next, over tens of thousands of years. It was incredible, seeing the power of the water and the power of the erosion that cut through that granite. It really is something primordial. On an intellectual level, you can say, yeah, I can see the power of erosion, but it wasn't the same being in it, having that torrent in my face. I felt it in my bones, the constant impact of the water. And I'm not made of rock.
The further you go into the canyon, the more you really feel like you're underground. It's extremely narrow and extremely deep. No light gets in and the walls are perfectly smooth. Not even moss can grow here at the bottom. Right when you really feel like you've reached the center of the mountain, there's a tube maybe 1 meter in diameter, really narrow, with a waterfall flowing through it. And at the end of the tube, around 20 meters deep, you see light. Then you think, okay, if I can get through the tube, I'll get out of the canyon.
There's a very meditative aspect to it. You go into the center of the earth, you cut off from the world, you don't even know really what time it is. And when you come back out, you feel like you're reborn, like you've come back into the world. You can see the green of the trees, hear the sounds and bird calls.
It's all well and good to look at things in a book from an intellectual perspective. But it's when you feel it and you live it, that experience that really makes things fascinating.
While the lava that partly makes up this canyon flowed barely 10,000 years ago, a blip on the geological timescale, some volcanic events in Canada are much more recent. So recent that people remember them. But humans and volcanoes can be a very bad combination. Located on the Nass River in central western BC, the village of Gitwink is as peaceful as they come. Yet the community has a tragic history. It was founded by the survivors of the worst natural disaster in Canadian history. Around 300 years ago, the Edziza volcano erupted 20 kilometers away from the Nass River. Lava flowed down the valley, burying 2 Nizhga villages along the way. 2,000 people lost their lives. The survivors passed the story of the eruption down through generations. As a result, we can hear a detailed version of the account today directly from their descendants.
The ground started to shake. It's like an earthquake. They thought it was an earthquake. And they could see smoke coming over the mountain behind them. They reported about a horrible fire monster. They called it Lachmich. Lachmich literally translates as to be on the flames or on the fire. They described this monster as having legs of fire. It had a body of mist and steam. When it came, it was moving too fast for them to run away. It got covered by the lava. Other people running away from the lava were burnt by the fires. Those who came on this side of that lake, with the lava, it pushed the river in front of it. And so a wall of water coming this way. So those members of our family did so by climbing on this mountainside, going above where the water was pushing. And they say the river was fighting the fire. They could see these 2 monsters fighting each other for who's going to get to go by.
The Nizhga lava fields are a burial site, a natural monument to the memory of the dead. Many questions remain about the way the events unfolded, and studying the imprints left by the solidified lava can help us learn more. Glenn and his research team went to the source of the lava, the Edziza volcano. Through observations in the field, they hope to lift the veil on some historical uncertainties.
We're on the site of one of the most recent volcanic eruptions in Canada, around 250 to 300 years ago. We don't know exactly when. The Nisga'a oral history talks in detail about the lava flow. They talk about the fact that it could have killed upwards of 2,000 people. However, there's also some limited evidence from some Spanish sailors who may have been on the Nass River at the same time, who mentioned seeing a wall of fire. So one theory to explain these observations, as well as the speed at which the people may have been killed, is that there could have been a forest fire triggered by the lava flow. You can really see the difference here. These small gas bubbles versus the big ones, around the edges. They're lighter, the other one's much denser. Normally, lava flows are slow moving. You can walk faster than most lava flows. So by carrying out our studies, we're going to try to understand the properties of the rock. Can we try to create models that will tell us, was this a really fast flowing lava flow? Or was it the flow that triggered a forest fire? Did we also have volcanic gases that came out and that was responsible for killing the people?
Aha, look at that. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Oh my gosh.
Les bulles de gaz ont... So the gas bubbles, they swelled and merged to give us these little things that look almost like wasps' nests or something organic. It means that the lava was very, very liquid and very rich in gas, and that ejected these drops of lava.
So the goal here is to try to understand what happened when the volcano erupted. We do this by looking at the surroundings and also by trying to map the area. The lava flowed down the valley, turned 90 degrees towards the Nass Valley, and then 90 degrees again, farther down. But we don't really know how the various episodes of the flow occurred. And this is when the 3D model that we're trying to make comes in. It will help us better understand what happened.
From up in the air, Francois, Xavier, and Damien take part in the research effort. Glenn asked them to put their plane to use for creating a model of the flow in 3 dimensions.
We have a camera attached to the frame of our plane just to my left here that I'll be able to switch on when we begin our flyover. Glenn and his assistants give us a very precise flight plan. We'll try to stay constantly at the same altitude above ground, which is 500 meters. We'll fly back and forth in a grid pattern above the lava flow. The idea is to take a lot of photos of the same object from different angles in order to deduce the 3rd dimension. It's called photogrammetry. It's the same principle that we used to use to derive altitude for topographical maps.
Glenn and his team follow the trajectory of the flow and under the blazing sun, reach the lava fields. While sterile in appearance, this rocky desert of 180 square kilometers harbors a resilient flora that has adapted to this lunar landscape. But it will never replace the forest that formerly blanketed the banks of the Nass River.
So this is basically the mold left by a tree that was knocked down from the lava flow. But when you look inside, you can see a very distinctive texture. Is the actual tree catching fire, burning, and the burning is hot enough to remelt the lava, and the lava invades this charcoalized tree. If you burn a piece of lumber and then pour water on it, you'll be left with this, this charcoal pattern.
Même qu'on est très très loin de la source, on voit. Even though they're really far from the source, we see almost no crystals in the rock. So this means that the lava was completely liquid right before it cooled. And with samples like that we see here, it's really possible that in fact the lava flow started very quickly and therefore was responsible for killing the people.
As the sun sets over the valley, Francois Xavier and Damien join Glyn and his team to observe the 3D model created using the aerial photos of the flow.
So this is the model, huh?
Beautiful.
And it's really thanks to the photos that you shot.
It's incredible.
There's so much detail. So you found that the speed of the lava is actually what could have been fatal to the Nishka?
Yes. As soon as it entered the valley, it made a 90-degree turn and continued at high speed.
So one of your major discoveries of this research season is that the lava flow was probably very fast-moving?
Yes, and these initial observations by the Niska were correct.
It's pretty incredible being able to make a correlation between science and folklore.
Yes. Oral history is data that we can use. The only difference is the way the data was recorded. It's not written down, it's handed down orally, but it's still good fundamental data.
Damien and Francois Xavier have helped elucidate part of the mystery. Several questions obviously remain, and most of them will be left unanswered, buried under the Niska lava fields. Earth, water, air, and fire. 4 elements that make up our planet. So complex, so multifaceted, and so fertile. They say there is beauty in simplicity. It seems that some places have used these 4 elements as a painter would, soberly and with restraint. Landscapes of infinite simplicity, like a return to the primordial earth before humans, before life. A land that seems completely untrammeled. So when humans set their footprints on the soil of the Edziza volcano, it's with the humility of those returning to their origins.
Wow, we're getting some sun here.
Yeah.
It really brings out the colors, it's fantastic.
But, even without the sun, just the contrast between the colors of the rock, the contrasting red and white.
There's even some purple over there.
Yeah.
And that deep orange there.
Yeah, it's just vivid.
Incredible. So, Glenn, to what do we owe the Edziza Massif?
Well, Edziza is in the Spectrum Range, which is part of the northern Cordilleran volcanic province formed by plate tectonics. But instead of the type of tectonics we saw in Garibaldi, which was subduction,
meaning a plate that slips under another plate.
Yeah, exactly. Here it's a transverse fault, so the plates are moving side by side.
So parallel.
Yeah, horizontal. Yes, parallel. And due to that movement, the continental crust is stretched like an elastic band. And when you stretch an elastic band, it gets thinner in the middle.
The crust gets thinner.
Yeah, the crust gets thinner. And so due to this thinning, magma can more easily form and rise or float to the top. And that's really what's responsible for the formation of this huge volcanic province.
So where we are, the crust is much thinner, right? And the magma could rise to the surface.
Exactly.
Where do these beautiful colors we see around us come from? The red, the purple, and orange?
Well, this spectrum of colors, and thus the name Spectrum Range, is really just due to something pretty simple: rust. Just tiny amounts of iron in the rocks become corroded by the oxygen in the atmosphere. So, as it's corroded by this interaction with the climate, it forms these incredible colors.
We're talking thousands of years, I imagine.
Yeah, thousands of years, absolutely.
Well, sometimes nature does a great job, huh?
Oh, yeah.
It's so beautiful.
You just need lots of patience.
Yeah.
You ready for a foot bath?
Oh, yeah.
I wonder about the temperature.
It's going to be a bit chilly.
It'll wake us up.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty cold.
It'll wake us up.
Yeah. I feel like for every adventure we have to take our shoes off and cross a river. It's getting to be a habit.
Anything for science.
Anything for the science and exploration.
It's a good chance to wash our feet.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fine. It's great.
Yeah, stop playing the tough guy. I know you're suffering.
Oh my God. These kinds of scenes, we should film them in the Amazon or Costa Rica or something. You know, without the piranhas.
In a Speedo?
Yeah, in a Speedo.
This really hurts. Glenn, when I walk around a landscape like this, I feel like I've returned to the origin of the planet.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we can imagine being on the Earth's surface billions of years ago.
Yeah.
A surface that was covered in active volcanoes, spewing columns of gas and ash. Seriously, some incredibly hostile conditions. But these volcanoes are in part the reason we eventually got the atmosphere we have now. It was obviously super toxic at the time.
Yeah, at the time there was ammonia.
Yes, CO2, acid gases, sulfur. But one of the most common gases in volcanoes is actually water vapor. And over time, that gave rise to the atmosphere we have now, as well as all of the oceans. And in these primary oceans were the conditions favorable for the eventual development of primordial life.
Could fire have possibly given rise to life? The irony is almost too perfect. Buried in a layer of clouds, the majestic Mount Edziza, sacred to the Toltan people, seems quite indifferent to the life it towers over. Yet everywhere on its slopes, ravaged by successive eruptions, there is a kind of infinitely austere beauty. Far too inaccessible for the uncharted Canada team, Mount Edziza was left to its cloudy isolation. On their trek around the mountain, the adventurers cross plains so fertile they seem straight out of the Serengeti in Africa. They wear down the soles of their shoes on lava fields as sharp as glass before reaching the final step in their journey, the majestic Eve Cone, a biblical name that, oddly enough, refers once again to our most primordial origins.
And there's Eve Cone in all its splendor. One of the smallest cones in Canada, but also one of the most beautifully shaped. Huh?
It's beautiful.
And it's so beautifully shaped. You can see that it's all black at the top, so there's really not very much lichen yet, which means it's really quite young.
Really young, huh?
Yes. You know, around 1,300 years ago, imagine a fountain of lava spewing into the air, jets going up tens to even hundreds of meters high. All this material gradually falls back down to form this cone. You know, it's like a Coke bottle. You just shake up that bottle and you'll see the froth starting to form. Well, that's the volcanic gas under pressure. The cap then flies off and you get this massive explosive eruption.
So the explosive eruptions are due to gases contained in the lava?
Yes, absolutely. These gases expanding are the energy that propels everything upwards.
We can see traces of lava. Is there a way to see gas remnants?
Yes, actually, you know, in the lava there will be remnants. If you take a piece and you break it open, so you can see all these different bubble sizes.
Flattened bubbles too.
Yes, because the lava was moving. So it stretched the vesicles, the bubbles that are in the lava. And there aren't any crystals. We've just seen volcanic glass.
That's volcanic glass.
Yeah.
That trapped the gas.
That makes it very light, right?
Yeah, it makes it much lighter.
Glenn, you told us about the Earth's first billions of years. What happens next?
You got to really imagine the advent of the earliest life, which started, we believe, in an incredibly hostile environment, around vents on the ocean floor. Kilometers deep, these little miniature volcanoes. And then we gradually see the emergence of cyanobacteria, or blue-green algae, which was the beginning of photosynthesis on our planet.
My friends, you're gonna love the view.
Yes, fantastic.
Yeah, quite the view.
It's huge.
And there's the crater.
Yeah.
It's gigantic, a mouth open to the sky. And the crater is right in front of us?
Yeah.
And what was ejected is behind us.
And all the lava flows.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Should we take a walk?
Yeah, towards Edziza.
All right, let's go.
So, were blue-green algae the precursors of the plant kingdom?
Yeah, exactly. Because, what did the blue-green algae do? They removed carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and as a waste, injected that oxygen into the atmosphere. So gradually, the atmosphere starts to really change. So afterwards, plants start to spread all across the planet. And through photosynthesis, they continued changing and modifying the atmosphere by adding more and more oxygen. It's really only afterwards that we see the arrival of animals.
The animal kingdom follows the plant kingdom.
Yes. The first fish dared to crawl onto land and adapt to an atmosphere that was now rich in oxygen. So, over time, all life that we see on our planet gradually started to evolve and change.
So, the beginning of a great chain of life.
Exactly.
And at the end of the chain is us, humans.
Us, humans.
I think that's the perfect conclusion to this amazing adventure.
Such a beautiful journey.
Exactly. From volcanoes to humans.
Amazing. And with the most beautiful view there is.
Absolutely.
The Yvonne crater. Well, guys, it was a pleasure to go on this adventure with you.
It was awesome.
Amazing.
Really awesome.
Yeah.